too long with this. We could go on and on, but it's kind of warm. It's kind of warm, so we'll try not to hold you too long. Joyce and I went to Israel. Well, we went to Egypt and Israel in May. We left home on May the 2nd, and we got home on May the 18th. So we were gone for 16 days. We've been to Israel before. We were there in we were there in the year 2005, so 13 years ago. And when we got back from that trip, we told my brother-in-law and sister, Glenda, Alvin and Glenda, that if they ever went, we'd like to go back. Well, then we forgot about it. But in December, I didn't think it ever happened. But in December, we got the call from Alvin, and he said, we're going in May for the 70th anniversary of Israel's 70th birthday. And he said, would you like to go? And I thought, oh boy. At that moment, it was bad because we had 4 family members in 3 different hospitals. And I just really couldn't even think about it for quite a while. But finally in January, we thought, let's go. And I think we signed up. We were like the day of the deadline. We just barely got in. Let me give you a little summary of this trip. We went to 4 different continents, 5 different countries. We were in the capitals of 4 different countries. We flew on 10 different airplane flights, completely separate airplane flights. We were on 15 taxi or shuttle rides, 4 commuter train rides, 2 subway rides, and for 8 days we rode on a bus. But I didn't drive, not the whole time. Not once, the whole time. The 4 continents were, of course, North America, Africa, Asia, and Europe. The 4 continents, the 4 capitals that we went to were Cairo, Egypt, Amman, Jordan, Jerusalem in Israel, and we came back on a Russian airliner, so we landed in Moscow. So we started in New York, so we have some slides. Joyce will show the slides. She may have a comment or two along the way, and I told her if she has one, she needs to just shout it out there. This is kind of really the end of our trip, not the beginning of our trip. Double click it and see what happens. Can everybody see those? Do we need to shut off lights or anything?
You can turn out all the lights, Ron, except for that little one where we see Brother Randall. Can you get it? Or you want me to?
This was actually at the end of our trip. Due to a scheduling error on my part, we had an extra day in New York City. Have any of you been to New York City? Several of you have. We've had mostly good experiences in New York City, mostly. This time we had one that wasn't so good. We got basically robbed, I guess you could say, or swindled or whatever. But mostly good experiences because the people up there turned out to be surprisingly friendly and helpful. When they realize you're a tourist and they sort of see that look on you, they'll be nice to you. I actually sat on a train next to a lady, and I told her I was from Oklahoma, and she said, well, I was in Oklahoma once. I was in Tulsa. I said, okay, yeah, well, not real close to where we live, but same state. And then I was telling her about the day of the September 11th terrorist attacks. I was planting wheat, and I said we put a flag on our tractor to show solidarity with those people. She said she was like 2 buildings over from when those towers went down, and she heard it and all that. And whenever I told her that we had put a flag on, we were thinking about them. She got kind of a little bit emotional about that, but thinking about somebody out in the middle of nowhere, thinking about them in New York City. This is in New York City. One of my one of my goals is to go to I don't call it a bucket list, but one of the things that I want to do is to go to every president's grave. And so while we were in New York City, we rode trains and so forth, and we got to this one, Grant's tomb. Go ahead and click the next one. And there's President Grant and his wife. Talk loudly there. You can't read the name, but that's one's President Grant and the other's his wife. You've heard the joke, who's buried in Grant's tomb? We found out. This is very, very close to Columbia University, and we just happened to be there the day that Columbia University was having their graduation. ceremony. So we saw lots of people in caps and gowns on the subway and all around there. And then it was raining. You saw in that picture it was raining. We tried to go to one other president's grave, but we got to the end of the train line and it was about 2 more miles of walking, which on a normal day wouldn't have been too bad. Joyce walks 3 miles a day, so it wouldn't have been too bad. But in the rain, we said no way. So we missed. That was Theodore Roosevelt's grave. Okay, now to our main trip. When I told Alvin that years ago, I said, I'd like to go back, but I also want to go to Egypt. So we went to Egypt. But part of our adventure was we were a day late getting there. For several days before we left, I was watching the computer models and they were showing rain over Dallas-Fort Worth, and I thought, well, it probably won't really happen. It really happened. They had a shutdown at DFW. We were at Amarillo Airport with clear skies and nothing going on. They backed the airplane up, and it didn't go anywhere. And that's not a good sign. And finally, they came on and they said they've had a total shutdown at DFW Airport. So we were, for 3 or 4 hours sitting there. They let us off the airplane, but we missed our connecting flights. And you know how that, when you miss one connecting flight, you miss the next. We didn't get to Egypt until the next day. And so that was the day we were supposed to do our tour. Next. But Joyce said, well, if we're going to go this far, we're going to see something. So we got in a taxi. Oh, that was a wild ride. In Cairo, the taxis drive crazy, and
It was a 3-lane road, and a lot of times there was 5 cars. That was the 3 lanes.
and a few
And
pedestrians.
some buggies, and you'll see a buggy here, or horse-drawn buggies, or, oh my goodness, stuff like that. It was wild, 1 hour there, and a wild 1 hour.
We went to the pyramids. This is the Nile River. The taxi driver stopped and let me get a picture of the Nile. Next. And what you expect to see in Egypt, the pyramids and the Sphinx. We got there, though, and it was almost 4 o'clock, which, 4 o'clock, this time of year I wouldn't have, in May, they were shutting down. We couldn't actually get in there. So we didn't actually get to go any closer than this, but we did get that close. Next. And the proof that we were actually there. We were actually at the pyramids. Once we found we couldn't actually go in, we said, taxi driver, would you stay here? I don't want to try to find a taxi in this mess. Can you stay here? And you know where our hotel is. You can get us back there. And he said he would, and he took us back. Another hour of traffic. Next. Joyce is going to try something here. She's going to...
I'm not good at this, guys, so.
She's going to try to zoom in on this. There were like camel in that picture. There are camels and horse-drawn carts and so forth. And there's actually a little bitty pyramid there too that you can see when you zoom in. Yeah, there was a gentleman there that we went to the top of the building and took these pictures. Now go to the left. There's a horse-drawn cart.
Yeah, she did good.
Okay, let's go to the next. Oh, go ahead.
That right there's a camel, and then this is one like the horse-drawn buggies that are sometimes in the road.
Yeah, along with pedestrians and everybody else. Cairo is the biggest city in Africa and the biggest city in the Arab world, and I can believe it. It is a crowded place.
Now, do I have to go back?
Just click on that. Yeah. Next picture. Here's the hotel that we stayed in, and it was I just did this thing online, but it was a really nice hotel. I mean, really fancy. And the good thing about Egypt right now is you get 17 Egyptian pounds for $1, and things are really pretty cheap. This hotel was what, $70?
70-something.
In New York or somewhere like that, it had been maybe 300 or 400, I don't know. It was really nice. Next. There's another view.
We had 2 swimming pools, a tennis court, and I don't know what all else. Wow.
Really nice, but once you got past the hotel grounds, it was
Right across the street was
slum.
They had those x-ray machines as you go into the airports. They had a small one that they x-rayed our luggage. They gave us a band to wear.
Yeah, we had to wear a band while we were in there.
The whole time we were there, we had to have our band on. And it was a guarded gate in front of us. So they were really careful about who went in and who went out.
So one night in Cairo, and then we left. So if you'll go to the next picture. This is just a map of Israel. I don't know if you can see it real well, but Joyce can maybe show you Amman. We flew to Amman, Jordan. Couldn't fly directly from Cairo to Tel Aviv, so we flew to Amman. And then we had this little hop from Amman to Tel Aviv. And can you see that cursor at all? Anyway, we went, you can't really blow that up much, I don't think. So then we went north to the north part of Israel. We stayed 3 nights in Nazareth and then 5 nights in Jerusalem. And we went all the way to the north end of Israel, all the way up there to the little tip. We could look over into Syria. We could look over into Lebanon. And the night we were up in that area, that very day, that we were up there one day, that very night was the night that the Iranians were shooting the missiles over there toward the Golan Heights.
We got to see one of those things.
They call it the Iron Dome, the missile defense. We didn't see it in action, but it was in action that night, I think. Next. I think the next picture is our guide. This particular gentleman's name, and I had really trouble pronouncing it, Yeshai Avital. Yeshai is Jesse. He said Jesse like father of David, but they pronounce it Yeshai. A real interesting guy. His parents came from Eastern Europe. He said none of his family was lost in the Holocaust, but in the 1940s his family came to Israel. He was born in Israel. The people that are born in Israel, they call them sabra, which means cactus, because they're kind of prickly. Sabra, S-A-B-R-A. Sabra are native Israelis, people that are actually born in it, Jewish people born in Israel. Both of our guides, our guide 13 years ago and our guide this time, were native Israelis, Sabras. They both had some military experience. Our first guide had a lot of military experience. How can you describe these Jewish men? They are opinionated. They are, the Jewish culture is very male-dominated. Very male-dominated. So Joyce got a sense of that, especially with our first guide. Our first guide was a secular Jew. He didn't observe the Sabbath or anything. He said he would eat pork. I thought, well, that's surprising. But this guy was an Orthodox Jew, and when the Sabbath came around, we didn't see him. He was observing the Sabbath. We had another secular Jew that day. Your guide, Brother Ron, you said that was named Abraham? Was he a Jew?
Yeah, he was a Jew.
Sometimes you get an Arab guide. The bus driver on our bus was an Arab, but the guide was Jewish. I mean, he was an Israeli Arab, the bus driver was. And everything seemed to be, they got along great. Next. These people went along on our tour. Sister Lucy probably recognizes them. Most of you probably do. Glenda and Alvin Bushman. There were actually 100 people in our group. We were on bus number one, where there were about 50 people on that bus. And they were on the same bus, which is great. Next.
Where's that picture at?
That was at Capernaum. So, the picture's a little bit out of order. This is a hailstone. When we first got to, how much of this story should I tell? When we first got to Tel Aviv, late in the evening, our taxi driver we asked him to check. He called ahead to find out where our hotel was, and he said, and the hotel guy said, well, they never did respond to our emails because we did. Here's a bit of advice. If you do any foreign traveling, take along a smartphone, check your emails and all that stuff, because we didn't have any of that. And so we lost our hotel, but he took us around or he called different hotels and couldn't find anything. No hotel. We thought we were going to be home. We thought we were going to be sleeping on the streets of Tel Aviv that night. But you can go ahead and go to the next one, Joyce. Well, yeah, I'll tell you the story about the hail, and then we'll get to where we stayed. Our first morning there, we went down to the beach, partly cloudy day, came back in where we were staying, and some stranger asked me, I don't know, just said, is it going to rain? And I said, oh, probably not. It's May. This is Israel. It doesn't rain much in May. Within what? 10 or 15 minutes, it started thundering, and it started hailing, and that's a hailstone. And you could see some little hailstones down there. They weren't all that little. Some of them were probably, some people would call them quarter size or a little bigger maybe.
They told us this, I think this had happened in about 30 years.
Yeah, it hadn't happened there like that in 30 years.
In this location.
So I didn't tell them I was a meteorologist, so. Next.
Not a good time to say that.
There's the beach in Tel Aviv, on the beach on the Mediterranean. Next. There's some big buildings in Tel Aviv. Tel Aviv's a lot different than Jerusalem. Tel Aviv's a much more worldly city. Jerusalem's a more religious city. Next. There's where we stayed.